Hi everyone, Sean Humphreys here. Welcome to this edition of the Take Charge of Change podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we're going to talk about the iceberg that sinks organizational and culture change. So if you're in charge of change or trying to steer course correct your organization, this is a really great podcast to listen to. So you'll enjoy this edition of the Take Charge of Change podcast. So this article was written by Jeff Desjardins, and the article incorporated this infographic on the iceberg that sinks organizational change. And I thought it was a really great visual. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the infographic, and then we're going to talk about the issues and potential solutions to create engagement so that you'll be successful in organizational change. And it doesn't matter whether you lead a team of 3 or a team of 100 or in charge of a really large organization, multinational, transnational, large government agency. So first of all, let's look at the dilemma. So the dilemma when we look at organizations is what I'm showing you here is what's showing up above the waterline. This is the visual of what the public sees, and this is our stated priorities as an organization. So you can see there's strategy and vision. It could be goals of the organization, the formal policies in place, structure, shared values, and in quotes, it's the way we say we get things done organizationally. But in reality, that's probably only 10% of what really goes on in the organization. The other 90% is below the waterline, and those are internal beliefs, internal shared values that get passed around, procedures for how actually things get done. And those may not be the formal policies. It could be traditions. In other words, it's just the way we've always done it, and people aren't sort of questioning whether that's the best way of doing it. Norms that have built up over the years, the internal values shared by staff and teams, unwritten rules, the stories or narratives that get passed around, and internal feelings. And so this is the way we really get things done within the organization. That's 90% of really what's happening internally. Now, why that's really, really critical is that's going to drive, team engagement and profitability or effectiveness of your organization. I'll give you one really, really quick example. All of us have been through exercises where the organization is setting a vision for its future. But it's hard for people not to be a little bit cynical around that, because sometimes it's seen as a bit of a PR kind of exercise. Sometimes it's sort of top-down driven. But the most important thing to keep in mind is that if you want to have engaged staff, you need to figure out ways of linking their own purpose, vision, and mission in their own personal lives to the purpose, vision, and mission of the organization. And you need to somehow figure out how you can bridge those two. In other words, your staff and the employees in your organization, your senior managers, your board, they need to see how their involvement in your organizational goals and objectives and mission and vision can be an extension of their own personal purpose, vision, and mission. In other words, your company, your organization, the work that they do is an extension of that. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done to create that connection between the two, but it's really critical because if you can do that, it creates the engagement that you want to see in the work culture. So the first thing that this article talks about is how to build a strong company or organizational culture, and they talk about culture really, really matters. And so company culture is a company's personality from the perspective of the employees. Okay, and that's a critical thing. Not necessarily from the perspective of senior management or the board. And it's a constellation of various things. So it's a constellation of the work environment, the mission of the organization. So again, that's going to drive engagement or not drive engagement. The values, is there a linking between the values of the organization and your staff? The ethics, the expectations, and of course the goals. All those things sort of tie into this equation. The next thing you talk about is a positive company culture is strongly linked to higher employee engagement. And engagement is really critical because engagement has dollars and cents impacts to the organization. And I don't care whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit organization, the argument for engagement is really critical. So those companies that have engaged staff on average have 22% higher profits. 21% higher productivity, 10% higher customer ratings, 25 to 26% less turnover of staff, 37% less employee absenteeism, and 48% fewer safety incidents. Huge. I mean, those are massive numbers. And organizations that can create that level of engagement then translates to really the effectiveness and health of the organization really benefit from that. So what are some ways you can create a stronger company culture? So the article goes on to talk about, first of all, be a brand. So make your workplace and employee practices reflect the core mission and values. And we know in our own life that we have to be really attentive to that. So somebody can ask me what my values are. So let's say my values are spending time with my family and really being a great dad, as an example. But when people, someone followed me around and looked at my allocation of time, what they'd find is, Sean, you said that's important to you, but you're not spending any time with your kids. There's a disconnect between those two. So although you state that that's a value, you're not doing anything practically to show that it's a value. You're not working on that value. And organizations are the same way. So we can go through an exercise of stating the values, but is there an internal consistency between what we say the values are in the mission and what we're actually doing in terms of our internal practices? Next thing is transparency. And this is one of the reasons why your staff are going to get cynical. We have to know when to apologize. We need to share not just successes, but failures and challenges we're going through. And then collaborate and engage your team to help with what needs to be done, help with the fixes, brainstorm, really get that engagement going through, really talking about both the good and the bad. And that's really important. Transparency is a way you'll create engagement and a better culture. Prioritize well-being. And so, make employees, mental and physical health a priority. And so they're not just cogs in this productivity efficiency wheel. So whether it's helping your staff be more effective in their relationships, accommodating flex time for issues at home with aging parents or kids, young kids, what are you actually doing to show them that you care? Because if you care, then they're going to go the extra mile for you. I remember years ago we were up in near Edmonton, Alberta, and it was in the middle of winter, and we hired a dog sled team. It was kind of a recreational opportunity for our family and my in-laws. And the fellow that had the team that sort of pulled those sleds, he said there's two ways you can train a team. You can train a team with love, or you can train a team with the whip. And I think sometimes organizations do the same thing. Rather than showing care, empathy, genuine concern, going the extra mile, really believing that if they show that caring attitude, that's going to come back to them in spades. They use a carrot and stick and policies and punishments, and it just becomes this adversarial kind of environment. So no wonder those organizations struggle in terms of engagement and effectiveness. So make well-being a priority. And then finally, reward valuable contributions and recognition. And what you see sometimes in organizations is they have a group of people, it might be only 5 or 10%, but they're really, really negative. And they're not engaged, and they will never likely be engaged. And they're counterproductive, and they're caustic within the organization. But what's ironic is senior people in the organization are trying so hard to bring them on board, to be part of where the organization is going to. Stop doing that. What you need to do is identify the 10% that are on board, that are doing the best they can, that are going above and beyond. Reward them, praise them, and send signals that you are going to do that, because in the middle of your organization is kind of the mushy middle, and they're watching. And to the extent that you are rewarding and recognizing and encouraging the people that are part of the solution, not part of the problem, you'll find that mushy middle kind of begins to drift in aligning their values and work habits and attitudes that people want to be part of the solution. So it's important to keep that in mind. And then embrace constructive feedback, gracefully give and receive corrective feedback, and of course support employee growth. The employee growth piece is critical, and that gets back to also what I talked about in terms of development. It's training as well that links that person's own purpose and vision and mission to the organization. They actually can see how the organization can be an extension of them fulfilling purpose, vision, and mission. So it's really, really critical. Get back to the whole issue of well-being and training. Take charge of change, that's what our mandate is helping to facilitate and enhance professional resilience, bounce back ability, perseverance by your teams. We work in a world now that is full of change and transition. And so our goal is to help organizations navigate change effectively through the building up of professional resilience. So if you manage teams, if you're a sales manager, a senior manager with an organization, a CEO leading an executive board, and you're intrigued about the idea of enhancing professional resilience, ultimately effectiveness, just not for your organization, but for your staff so they have a more fulfilled career, then reach out to us. We'd enjoy a conversation about how we can create customized training programs to help your teams to be more professionally resilient.